And they called 911 and told police officers their abusers punched them, put a gun to their head, even threatened to kill them. But a community watchdog investigation eventually revealed that police arrested those domestic violence victims and hauled them off to jail. Nate Morbido discovered the same justice system that victims look to for protection occasionally labels them as criminals.
Here are their mugshots. We've spent the last 2 months filing public records requests and reviewing criminal cases and jail logs, and discovered something advocates call horrifying. We found more than a dozen cases over the last year, the equivalent of at least one a month, where prosecutors put domestic violence victims behind bars. Jail, a place you'd expect to find hundreds of defendants.
Booking, camping.
But they're not the only ones locked away.
He planning on bonding.
On any given day, the Washington County Detention Center houses the last people you might expect, victims of domestic violence. People like Donna Oliver.
Thought they could help me.
She reported domestic abuse twice in a matter of 3 months last year.
He's thrown me down off the bed. I've gotten a Doc Martin to the face.
But after her second call to 911,
that was one of the worst experiences of my life.
She eventually found herself looking right into the lens of a jail camera as it snapped her mugshot. Her crime? Contempt of court.
I just thought, why? Why would you do that to somebody?
Prosecutors charged these other victims, all but one of them women, with the same crime. They all received one of these, a subpoena, in order to testify in court against their alleged abuser. All of them failed to show up, which is a jailable offense.
It's got to stop.
Bill McManus says just because the law allows for their arrest doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. He represents one of the victims.
She was arrested, had to post bond, and then come back to court, miss work, that kind of thing, and end up in the busted paper and everything else.
Court records show the more than dozen victims who faced the punishment of jail reported their abusers punched them in the face, headbutted them, choked them, spit on them. One said her boyfriend put a gun to her head. Another said her boyfriend threatened to kill her. Police took these pictures of one victim's injuries. The woman said her child's father dragged her down the stairs and threw her to the floor. She later posed for another picture, a mugshot.
We should expect more. We should expect those people to be protected rather than turned into defendants themselves.
Defense attorney Patrick Denton shared this voicemail with us.
This is 88 Marshall again.
Washington County's domestic violence prosecutor left a message with a victim earlier this year.
If you do not come in to the sheriff's office or to the Justice Center to be served with a subpoena, come 5 p.m. next week, I will issue a contempt warrant to have you arrested for contempt of court.
Denton considers it a clear threat.
I mean, it's kind of chilling. Here's a woman that called the police because she needed help, and now, a couple months later, she gets a voicemail that says, now you might be the one that's going to jail. I mean, think about that.
Consider this, too. In the heat of the moment, victims will call 911 for help. But in the months after, when they have time to think about the consequences of that call, some victims will reconsider whether they want to move forward with a criminal case.
I'm going to call her docket.
Afraid it could result in more harm than good. So they choose not to testify. In the past, prosecutors would dismiss many of those cases. Not anymore.
How paternalistic is it on the part of the government to think that they know what's best for these women?
It did catch me off guard.
Shocked by our discovery,
It re-traumatizes the victim.
Lynn Armstrong urged the system to allow victims to make decisions about what's best for them. She's supportive of prosecutors holding the abusers accountable, but says they're going about it the wrong way by holding victims accountable too.
What's the definition of abuse? It's power and control. So who's now taking that power and control over the decisions?
And argues forcing victims to testify will put them in danger.
It is deeply concerning.
She should know. Her sister is a domestic violence survivor.
I'll say this much. Had they forced my sister to testify against her husband, she and her children would be dead today. And this is not fair to victims.
I'm not going to go back and apologize for what I think that we done, because I think that we were doing the right thing.
Of the nearly 1,000 domestic violence cases in Washington County annually, District Attorney Tony Clark says the cases where victims are jailed are the equivalent of roughly 1%. A severe but rare punishment, he argues, is in the best interest of public safety.
If we don't, as prosecutors, do our job, then I think that the increase in the number of domestic violence cases and the severity of domestic violence cases is going to happen.
Clark says as much as he doesn't like putting victims in jail, prosecutors needed to send a message.
At some point in time, where do we draw the line in saying that we're just going to dismiss these cases if a victim does not appear?
He believes victims are essential to successfully prosecuting the most serious cases. Since his office started cracking down on victims about a year ago, he says more of them have started showing up to court. If they are punched in the face, if they are spit on, if they are choked, is there not a better solution than putting these women in jail?
And I'm glad you asked that, Nate.
Clark says prosecutors are in talks with the judges to see if there's a way to serve victims with a contempt of court summons instead of arrest. That would at least help them avoid jail, but they'd still have to appear before a judge in a courtroom. It's too late for Donna Oliver.
I've been a victim who's been re-victimized.
She says the damage is done. We were there last month as the state eventually dismissed her contempt case, but only after she spent several painful hours in jail, where she says she suffered worse injuries than she did at home.
My knees were badly bruised. You could see grab marks all over my legs.
Her attorney provided us with these pictures. Oliver says she suffers from anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, prompted by years of abuse. While in jail, she says in the midst of a panic attack, she begged detention officers to let her take off her own clothes and to not put their hands on her.
I was grabbed by both male and female guards, thrown down, maced.
Officers reported they used force and chemical spray, resulting in very minor injuries after Oliver made suicidal comments and made an aggressive motion toward a nurse.
Do I think we are re-victimizing victims? No, I don't.
Clark insists the cycle of abuse that Oliver suffered at home is the kind prosecutors desperately want to stop.
It could be to prevent harm to them later on or to another victim later on.
As for her injuries in jail,
that's no fault of the state, Your Honor.
Both the state and judge said she is the one to blame.
You brought yourself to the jail for your lack of following the court's order.
One more thing to think about, a double standard. While some victims are sent to jail, the punishment isn't nearly as harsh for police officers who are no-shows in court. The DA says those officers are disciplined, sometimes ordered to pay court costs, other times punished by their departments. But he admits they're never sent to jail.
And the DA tells us before prosecutors started occasionally jailing those victims, they tried to bring them to court on what are called show cause hearings. But defense attorneys fought that too.